Bone broth fasting is cool. Look, it's not a typical kind of fasting. Yes, you're consuming a few calories, so it's not a traditional fast, but it comes with its own myriad of potential benefits. Okay, so I've come up with 5 times that it's best to do a bone broth fast. So without further ado, let's jump in. The first one is if you're fasting for gut purposes. Look, like a regular fast, a 16, 20 hour, 24 hour traditional fast still has some potential gut effects. Okay, what's going to happen there is you're going to be increasing that gut motility. When you are fasting and not eating anything at all, your gut gets a chance to clean up, so to speak. Okay, basically the migrating motor complex increases, and that improves like sort of how the gut cleans out potential waste and things like that. Now that's if you're doing a traditional fast. If you have bone broth in the equation, there's some bodies of evidence that suggest that the collagen can help stimulate the production of what are called chondrocytes. Now, chondrocytes are like precursors to collagen and can really even potentially help you out with gut integrity. But collagen is also rich in proline, and proline can help break down some of the proteins that can help support that gut lining a little bit more. But one of the things that I'm a big fan of when it comes down to collagen is there's just a nice amount of glutamine. Not too much, not too little. And glutamine has a lot of evidence behind it when it comes down to the gut mucosal layer. So when we're fasting traditionally without bone broth in the equation, we can actually break down our gut mucosal layer. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's why your gut is so sensitive after you break a fast. With bone broth, it kind of helps stop that. So you could fast while keeping the gut mucosal layer and that gut integrity in check. So if you occasionally want to do a 16, 20, maybe a 24-hour fast with just consuming bone broth, maybe every couple of hours or so, you might feel that your stomach feels pretty good when you do that. So give it a shot. The next one is if you're working up to a longer fast. So let's say you're normally doing like a 16-hour fast or maybe a 20-hour fast, and you're wanting to increase up to a 24 or up to a 28 or a 36. And you just don't necessarily have either the willpower or you just get really, really hungry. This is where adding bone broth in at that stage would be helpful. So let's say you got to 16 hours or 20 hours and you start getting really hungry. Well, have a little bit of bone broth. Does it break your fast? Technically, but it's so negligible, it might just allow you to continue that fast, get back in the fasted state quickly, and get more benefit out of that longer fast. So you have to ask yourself the question, is breaking my fast with a couple calories from bone broth worth it if it means that I can allow myself to work up to these longer fasts? So it's mentally satisfying, but of course you have the salt that's in the bone broth. Okay, we have these things called NST neurons, and NST neurons in our hindbrain normally inhibit salt cravings. Okay, so when you are deficient in salt, like when you're fasting, because you probably are low in sodium, okay, what happens is these NST neurons, their inhibitory effect in terms of salt cravings goes away. So we start craving salt like crazy. Well, then we have this region of the brain called the mesolimbic dopamine region, okay? And these signals end up telling the brain to do stuff, and we have to translate that into an action. So a lot of times when we're fasting, we're really craving salt, but what our brain is telling us is eat some sugar or eat some carbs. So we end up getting those cravings. So a lot of times just having a little bit of bone broth, just 10, 20 calories worth of bone broth and some salt that's in it, ends up making it so that you don't have those cravings. You can push it a little bit longer. So it's a great tool to use as sort of an interstitial kind of like tool for increasing your fasting length. The bone broth that I usually use is called Kettle and Fire. I put a link down below if you want to check them out. They are a sponsor of today's video, which is obviously very apropos. So that link is down below. You can check them out on Amazon. So I put a couple different links down below for a couple different kinds of bone broth that you could use when you're fasting. So Kettle and Fire is awesome. They've been a sponsor on this channel for 5 years, I think, so a really long time. And they have all kinds of bases covered. They have chicken broth, they have beef broth, they have a sustainable sort of regenerative broth. They are really just doing it all. So that link is down below. That is the one that I'm a fan of. Plus, it has apple cider vinegar in it too, which comes with a whole different set of potential benefits for fasting. So again, check them out down below, and a big thank you to Kettle and Fire for the support on this channel. The next one is really cool. If you're trying to get more fat adapted, okay, and you're trying to get a little bit more out of your fasts, try taking some bone broth and adding a tablespoon or 2 of coconut oil to it. This clear as day breaks a fast, but it transcends you into a whole different world of fasting called fat fasting. And I've done specific videos on fat fasting. I'd like to do more because it's fascinating stuff, or should I say it's fattening stuff. But anyway, Sorry, I'm a dad. Now I have dad jokes. Anyway, that's just the way it works. But the point is that what fat fasting does is it's essentially soaking the cells, for lack of a better term, in fat. And what happens there is you have something that's called PPAR alpha. PPAR alpha is a nuclear receptor protein. And what happens is when it's triggered by fat, it goes to the nucleus of a cell and it changes the gene expression of that cell so that it gets better at using fat. There's a study that was published in the journal Clinical Chemistry and Lab Medicine that demonstrated just this. It showed that when PPAR was activated, typically by lipids, by tissue that's been released or by fats that are consumed, PPAR gets activated, it travels to the nucleus of a cell, and it triggers gene expression to change the entire dynamic of how that cell functions. So in essence, by being in a fasted state, and only consuming a little bit of bone broth with some pure fat, no carbs, no additional proteins, anything like that, you potentially activate more of this PPAR alpha, which potentially gets your cells more efficient at the enzymes and the transporters involved in using fats for fuel. So if you want to get better at fasting, fat fasting is a great thing. It's tremendous for beginners. So if someone's like doing a 20-hour fast and wants to increase to a 24, at hour 20, go ahead and add a couple tablespoons of coconut oil. But if you mix it up with a little bit of bone broth, not only does it make something delicious, but it makes something that covers the electrolyte basis for you, but it also gets you the fat in sort of a fun delivery way. It's just more fun to consume fat when it's mixed with bone broth. So anyway, you get that fat fasting effect along with the potential gut effect as well. The next one is going to be for more tissue repair. This one's more for active people. I find that people that are very, very, very active and doing a lot of working out or a lot of walking, a lot of moving around, sometimes fasting can be a little bit rough on the body. I find that my protein needs increase when I'm exercising a lot. And if I'm really heavily into a fasting regimen, I don't always get recovered enough. My Oura ring or my 8 Sleep or my Whoop strap will tell me, hey, your recovery is pretty poor because you're not getting sufficient protein on these days that you're fasting so much. Now, although the protein amount in collagen coming from bone broth is not all that much, it might provide you with just enough to make it so that maybe you're giving your body a little bit of what it needs to help support restoration and potential tissue repair. Again, it's somewhat speculative. The data on it is a little bit bleak, but I personally feel like it's made a difference for me. We do have to exercise some caution though. You could argue that by adding in a little bit of amino acids by way of like bone broth, potentially you're making it so that your body wants to start pulling more amino acids from your tissue. It sort of gets the craving for them and kickstarts gluconeogenesis. Again, speculative, but just do it sparingly on a day maybe where you're extra active and just need a few little bits of protein for support. And the last one is one that comes up a lot. Okay, that is going to be utilizing a bone broth fast after a cheat meal. Okay, now I never recommend rebounding off of a cheat meal in a reactive sense, going right into a fast. Okay, mentally, you need to be strong for that. And what I mean by that is if you have a cheat meal and then your reflex is to go right into a fast to sort of negate the effects of the cheat meal, you're kind of doing the wrong thing because mentally you're creating this like punishment system and it's just not the good thing to do. But if you really feel like, okay, yes, I'm going to enjoy this meal and I feel like it's a good day to do a fast to sort of like restore, a bone broth fast might not be a bad idea because you're going to have immense cravings after a cheat meal, simply because you end up on a blood sugar roller coaster ride. And remember, everything I talked about, when it ranges from salt, when it ranges from just consuming something, it helps make you feel a little bit more satiated. Okay, bone broth is not going to trigger a massive insulin spike. So even though it's calories, you're not really negating the effects of a fast all too much, but you're consuming something because the chances are you're going to be very hungry. So consuming a little bit of bone broth, maybe every 3-4 hours over a 20 or 24-hour fasting period after a cheat meal might just give you the little edge that you need to successfully get through it without caving halfway through. So I hope that these 5 things really recapped it for you. And just to recap it in general, you can do it for a gut reset. You can do it if you're working up to a longer fast. You can do it with a little bit of coconut oil to induce more PPAR alpha and overall fat adaptation. You can do it if you're active and you need a little bit of potential tissue repair while you are fasting, or you can do it after a cheat meal. So as always, keep it logged in here on my channel and don't forget to check out today's sponsor, Kettle and Fire, down below.